Thank you, Shireen. Welcome to this Fireside session on Green Sukuk for climate action. Data shows that global sustainable bond issuance, in which I include green, social, sustainability linked instruments and sustainability, totaled more than $1 trillion in 2023, bolstered by record levels of green bond sales. Issuance of impact bonds totaled almost 940 billion last year as well. And although this didn't quite match up to record issuance highs of 2021, when it reached $1.1 trillion, green bond sales from corporates and governments did, rising to $575 billion. Social bond sales in 2023 stood at $135 billion, some way below the record of $220 billion issued in 2021, which was a response to the pandemic. Issuance of sustainability bonds also fell back to about 160 billion last year. So sustainability-linked bonds actually saw the largest decrease in issuance volumes in 2023. At $68 billion, the total was some 22% lower than 2022. And that's likely explained by ongoing concerns regarding some credibility around target setting. However, ESG-aligned investors are seemingly supporting the understanding that this world is not going to deliver against a 1.5-degree warming situation if financing is limited solely to green assets, because there simply isn't sufficient supply. Since being introduced at COP26, the conversation related to transition financing has shifted positively compared to 3 years ago. And this year we've seen already that Japan has issued $11 billion equivalent of sovereign climate transition bonds, with proceeds being deployed to fund the nation's green transformation program, and all indications that there's a significant expansion plan during the next decade. So having set the global context for sustainable bond markets, I'm sure you're all as enthusiastic as me to bring this discussion around to focus on developments both globally and regionally for Green Sukuk and other Sharia-compliant instruments that are going to help catalyse the sustainable Islamic market. In that regard, it's my honour and my privilege to introduce our contributors, our speakers to this fireside session. Shrey Kohli is Head of Debt Capital Markets and Product Origination at London Stock Exchange Group and a member of the Primary Markets Senior Leadership Team. He also sits on LSEG's Group Sustainability and Fixed Income Management Committees. Shrey chairs the high-level working group on Green Sukuk established at COP26 and was previously a member of the Advisory Council to the ICMA Green and Social Bond Principles. Raja Amir Shah Raja Azhar is CEO of HSBC Amana, and since his appointment in 2021, he's been responsible for executing HSBC Group's strategy in Islamic banking in Malaysia, driving sustainable leadership and value-based intermediation efforts. Raja Amir has made many significant contributions to the development of both international and Malaysian Sukuk markets, having originated, structured and executed multiple landmark Sukuk firsts for corporate, financial and public sector institutions across Asia. Shrey, to set the scene and as chair of the high-level working group on Green Sukuk, could you provide an overview as to the current size and scale of the Green Sukuk market?
Thank you, Stella, and delighted to be here. So Stella and Raja Amir, you've been members of the high-level working group as well. You'd remember when we set this up at COP26, the ambition was to get to a market that was issuing nearly $30 billion annually. From a starting point of about $5 billion in 2019 and 2020. And I would say we're halfway there. So in 2023, we saw $13.4 billion of green, social, and sustainability Sukuk issued in the market, which is nearly a 3 times increase from where we were when we set this up at COP26. ASEAN makes a majority of the share of the sustainable Sukuk which has been issued so far, nearly 50% between Indonesia and Malaysia. But with the Middle East catching up very quickly with significant issuance from the UAE as well as from Saudi Arabia, there's nearly been now $47 billion of sustainable Sukuk been issued, which in context of the amount of sustainable bonds been issued, it pales in number based on the stats that you gave, Stella. However, as a percentage of the Sukuk market, is getting to a similar envelope in terms of the percentage of sustainable bonds to the conventional bond market, so nearing 8 to 10%. And so we see a pretty big potential for growth over here to get to that $30 billion number. And the market is showing signs of strength in 2024 with an incredibly strong Q1 with over $4 billion being issued.
Thank you, Shrey. Raja Amir, from what Shrey said, and also from the data that we can see, this market is clearly growing. From your perspective as a banker, what do you think is driving the demand? And that's both within Malaysia and beyond it.
Thank you, Stella, and pleased to be here. There's a number of reasons why we see an increased demand, both from fixed income investors as well as financial institution customers. And I would break this down into three main topics. So the first one being an emphasis on sustainability and stakeholder awareness. So we need to be clear that there's a lot of pressure as well as a lot of encouragement, which is being put on issuers as well as corporates to adhere to the ever-evolving nature of climate change. So there's an urgency regarding climate change. Companies are becoming more aware of this. And by accessing the international as well as the domestic capital markets, they are able to put out their ambitions as well as raise financing to meet the significant amount of financing which is needed. In addition to that, the good work which is being done today with this document also is that collaboration that we see happening in the international market with ICMA and various other parties, which is also stimulating the market in terms of providing a very clear and document which allows issuers who have not issued in this market to be able to consider as well as assess this market. And then finally, in terms of the awareness portion, is that investors are asking for it. Investors are getting clearly more in touch with their needs to subscribe for sustainable issuances, and in turn that is driving fund managers as well to structure and to subscribe for these products. One more thing is also the respective listing requirements, which is also pushing investors as well because of the various respective jurisdictions. There are also listing requirements which who makes it onto certain indices and so on. So there's more disclosure which is being done by issuers, and again, by assessing the capital markets allows them that framework to be able to further disclose and publicize what they're doing. I would also say, Stella, in terms of the regulatory support as well as intervention by regulators, as well as certain cross-border incentives, are really pushing the market. So we see a lot of regulators within various jurisdictions coming up with frameworks, incentivizing issuers to assess the green markets. There's all sorts of grants as well as incentives which are being offered. So this is really pushing the market to issue. Now, there's also cross-border financing situations such as the cross-border adjustment mechanism, the CBAM, which is putting onto the plate certain costs which need to be incurred by issuers. So therefore, there's also an adherence to that. And therefore, by raising sustainable financing, that allows them to not only project their sustainable credentials, but also seek financing for some of these projects. And then finally, within the context of investment appetite and market awareness, I mean, this is something which is probably proves to the numbers that we talked about. There is a growing demand for both institutional as well as retail investors for ethical and sustainable investment opportunities, which is aligning with their own personal needs as well as their quest to obtain returns. So we can also see that there's also some of these Sukuk issuances are long-term in nature, so it provides that stable fixed income returns. We've seen, Indonesia and Malaysia raising their sustainable issuances within the context of 10 years. So that gives that continual fixed income flow for investors who are seeking those returns.
Thank you very much. Shrey, Raja Amir refers to raising awareness and to collaborative efforts as well. And in that regard, I know that you were involved in the recently published practitioners' guidance that the International Capital Market Association produced in collaboration with the Islamic Development Bank and the London Stock Exchange Group. And that was intended actually for the benefit of market participants. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the problem that we identified in the course of working together at the high-level working group is that the issuance of a sustainable Sukuk brings nearly two distinct challenges. First is structuring the Sukuk itself and communicating to investors both domestically as well as internationally to help them understand the structure of the Sukuk. And for a number of investors internationally who may not be Islamic finance investors, there's an element of demystifying that you need to do about Sukuk as an asset class itself. Despite there being pretty strong alignment between Sharia principles of investing and ESG principles of investing. And the second challenge is for credibility within the global market for sustainable financing within fixed income markets, the ICMA green bond principle, sustainability bond guidelines, as well as the sustainability linked bond principles are now the de facto standards that you use in the market. And there is a process that you go by setting up a sustainable framework to identify, at least for user proceeds bonds, where the money is going to, which projects it goes to. So both those two challenges create a hurdle or a little bit of friction in terms of issuing in the market. So the guidance, as you said, Stella, is a practical guidance which is out there, which is aimed to help issuers step through the process of issuing a sustainable Sukuk. And the guidance found a few things. We launched it in Riyadh last week with the Islamic Development Bank at the Golden Jubilee meetings of the ISDB. And what it found was widespread prevalence of the ICMA principles across multiple jurisdictions, so to prevent any fragmentation of standards, a large applicability of the use of proceeds and target populations, and very importantly, that some of the themes that ICMA has identified, blue finance, transition finance, and gender-based finance, which are critically important, I think, for the ASEAN region, extend very easily to Sukuk as an asset class as well, as long as you identify the use of proceeds. So the guidance is out there in the market, and the work now is really for us to work with domestic regulators, Sharia boards, rating agencies to point to the guidance so that it becomes effectively a way to clear that friction and transform that market from $13 or $14 billion to the 30 billion mark that I was talking about earlier.
Thank you. There's no doubt that we're amidst a period of very positive momentum within the sector. Raja Amir, I'm guessing that in your capacity of CEO at HSBC Oman, you do subscribe to the view that Green Sukuk can and will unlock capital at scale to facilitate or help facilitate the transition to a more sustainable economy. I'd be interested to know how you think that the recently published guidance will help to catalyze the market as well.
Yeah, thanks. From my perspective, the guidance document will be helpful for potential issuers who are looking to assess the market, because what it does is really it breaks down the nuances between Sharia compliant financing as well as the various potential structures under green, social, sustainable. We've talked about the blue as well as gender Sukuks that can be issued. So what it does is really mainstreams, I would say, in terms of the kind of issuances which are happening already in the market. And for those issuers who have already issued in the conventional space and who are considering issuing within the Islamic finance space and really tapping on that liquidity, which is extremely strong in the market, this document serves as a best practice document, which lays out very clearly in terms of the nuances, as well as providing very clear best practice principles, in addition to also giving a whole slew of case studies, which allows the reader to understand what has already accessed the market and provides that sort of framework for them to be able to consider. Secondly, I would say this guidance allows issuers to consider innovation in the green Sukuk market. It provides clarity. It shows what has been done before and what can be considered. So I would say that with such documents being very encouraged in the market, because it allows issuers that kind of comfort that this is a mainstream product and it's not something on the periphery.
Thank you. Well, we find ourselves already in May. I can't believe that 2024 is moving so quickly, but I'd like to open this to both of you, perhaps starting with you, Shrey. Keeping within the context of Green Sukuk and in no more than 60 seconds, please. What would you like to see achieved by the end of this year?
We could spend a lot of time on it, Stella. I mean, I point at two things. So one, as Raja Amir said, now that the practical guidance, which has been really driven by ICMA, ISDB, and LSEG has been set up, we would like multiple jurisdictions to start pointing to that in the ways that they can do. So through local Sharia boards, which are pointing towards the document, through regulators, which are pointing to it as a helpful resource which is available. Because what we don't want is the document to be put on a dusty shelf. What we do want is for it to be a living guide. Which is what we'd encourage you all at this conference to do as well, to read the document and see how it can be useful within your conversations. And second is just purely on numbers. So, I'm hoping and expecting that we go past the $15 billion number this year. I don't think 20 billion is unachievable, but to be on that road to 30 billion and to achieve that sooner and rather than later is what we're trying to catalyze the market. So those are my two hopes for this year.
Thank you. Raja Amir, your aspirations for achievements by the end of 2024, please.
Yeah, I'd like to see, as Shrey mentioned, an increased number of issuances in the market to further, catalyze the market further. Within that, I would hope to see a bit more diversification within the sectoral place. So, companies within the hard to abate sectors also looking to this market as a means to transition to a low carbon economy. So I'd like to see increased issuance, diversity of issuers, as well as the diversification of projects. When I say diversification of projects, I'd like to see capital markets being used to finance projects, beyond what we've seen already, which within the space. So, moving on to green transportation, renewable energies, we've seen waste management, sustainable agriculture, perhaps maybe even hydro energy, as well as waste to energy. So I'd like to see a diversification in issuers as well as projects. I'd like to see the continued global collaboration as we are doing today with ICMA, LSEG, and many partners on this project. I think it's integral for the industry to come together to be able to come to a landing on the various solutions on the table to be able to scale, as you mentioned, Stella, the kind of financings available in the market. And finally, I'd like to see innovations within the space as well. So we've talked about different issuers, different projects, further going down the curve in terms of nature-based solutions, multilaterals participating in this financing to remove the risk from the typical capital market investors. I'd like to see various transactional structures being embedded to cater for the various stages of the financing for these projects. And finally, I'd like to see a diversification in the type of issuances. So perhaps a Waqaf Sukuk could and hopefully will come to fruition in the near future, because this is a different asset class. The investors are looking at different forms of returns, and it is something which is very specific to Islamic finance. So I hope we can do that, and scale that further.
Thank you very much. Well, I certainly wish that we had longer, but we don't. We've reached our time. I'd certainly recommend to everybody who hasn't that you do take a look at the guidance that was recently published, because it takes a different look at bringing awareness to market practitioners. But Raja, Amir and Shrey, it just remains for me to thank you both for a very interesting and enlightening conversation, and it's been a pleasure to be part of that with you at Ethical Finance ASEAN 2024. Thank you very much. Shireen, handing back to you.